Yesterday, because see, between 6 and 7 is my commentary hour, if I choose to do that, as I put on the music. On yesterday, my school and myself was treated to a wonderful experience for Black History Month. There is a documentary. It is called Beyond Their Years: The Incredible Legacies of Herb Carnegie and Buck O'Neil. Now, Buck O'Neil, I knew about Buck O'Neil, because Buck O'Neil was baseball, and I followed baseball. Herb Carnegie, I did not know about, because he was an incredible African-American hockey player. Matter of fact, he never did get to the NHL, the National Hockey League, because of the color of his skin. The same thing happened with Buck O'Neil. He did not get to Major League Baseball because of the color of his skin. Buck played in the Negro Leagues along with Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby and Satchel Paige and all the Negro League greats. Buck O'Neil played in the Negro Leagues. Herb Carnegie played in a hockey league that was just under the NHL. Probably, arguably, the best African American who played the game of hockey. If you go in the Canadian area, matter of fact, my guest this morning is going to be calling from Toronto. And I asked him last night when we were talking, because I had never heard of Herb Carnegie. See, you learn something new every day. I had never heard of Herb Carnegie until the documentary yesterday. So I asked him last night, I said, Joseph, you ever heard of Herb Carnegie? He was like, oh, yes. All of us, everybody up here knows who Herb Carnegie is. I had no idea. But the documentary was produced by, the producer of it was Bryant McBride. And he was there. Because what it was we had a bunch of our schools come together in a theater, a Fabian Theater, historic Fabian Theater. And it was the showing of the documentary as well as a panel discussion. And there were 6 or 7 people on that panel discussion, and they were some powerful folks. I was telling people, my students didn't realize the collective power that was sitting in front of them who were answering those questions. Not to mention the power of the documentary about Buck O'Neil and Herb Carnegie. There were times throughout the documentary where I welled up and teared up of the experiences of Buck and Herb. For no other, they were the best in their game. They were the best at what they were doing. And the only reason they did not make it to the major leagues in their respective sports was for hatred. Because that's all it can be when you hold people back. Hatred and ignorance. When you hold people back from being where you are for no other reason than the color of your skin, that's just straight up hatred. It's hatred of the other person and it's hatred of yourself. The fact that you can participate in that, you hate yourself as well. The oppressor is no better than those that are being oppressed. That's what the oppressors don't understand, that you are no better than the people you are oppressing, because there's got to be some self-hatred of you there too. You may think it's self-love. You may think you're all that, as the kids can say, in a bag of chips. But the truth of the matter is, for you to inflict that type of hate on somebody else for no other reason than their difference, then there's some self-hatred with you as well. So the documentary is called Beyond Their Years. And as God would have it, as I was talking to my guest last night, he saw the same documentary on Tuesday. He saw Beyond Their Years on Tuesday. And I said, oh my God, my boys, we just saw that today. And it was yesterday, Friday. Outstanding. I don't know where it's going to be distributed. I don't know if it's going to be streamed. I don't know if it's going to be in theaters. But if you get an opportunity to see Beyond Their Years, the incredible legacies of Herb Carnegie and Buck O'Neil, 2 icons that blazed a trail in sport and changed the world, I strongly encourage you to watch it. If you see it come up on Netflix or on Prime or anywhere, if it comes that way, I don't know if that's what Brian intends to do. But if it does go that way and you see that title beyond their years, I implore you to watch it. It's not long. It's maybe 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour. It could be an hour. I'm not sure. But they had interviews on there with Buck O'Neill's family. They had interviews on there with Herb Carnegie. As a matter of fact, they had interviews, a major portion of the documentary, Bob Kendrick, the president of the Negro League Museum in Kansas City, is in there. Bob Kendrick has been on this show. I interviewed Bob a couple years ago. Matter of fact, since it's Black History Month, maybe I'll repurpose that and republish it and put it back out again. But I interviewed Bob Kendrick a couple years ago about the Negro Leagues. So beyond their years, the producer is Brian McBride. So he was on the panel. We had Mr. Russell Patterson. He was on the panel. He played in the Negro Leagues as well and is from the Paterson, New Jersey area. He's a coach here in the Paterson, New Jersey area for years. He's 85 years old. Memory still sharp, still talking trash. He talked about his years in the Negro Leagues. As it turns out, and I did not know this, his stepson and I played on the same Little League team. It was amazing as I talked to Mr. Patterson how many people we knew in common. So he mentions Albert Morrison. I said, Albert Morrison? I said, Albert and I played on the same Little League team. He said, well, that's my stepson. He said, Albert was a couple of years younger than me, but we were on the same Little League baseball team together. So as the more Mr. Patterson and I talked, the more people that we knew in common. Also, we had Mr. Carl, and I'm trying to think in terms of I got to think of his last name. It'll come back to me. I think it was Carl Willis. I think that was it. I'm not sure. But he was on the panel. He was a journalist. He was a reporter for USA Today at one point. He's written books as well. I'm going to see if I can get him on the show. And we had Dr. Latanya, because I don't have all the names in front of me. That's why, I'm struggling with trying to get all their names. Let me see. Let me go, because I did take a picture of the panel. So we had Brian McBride. We had Russell Patterson. We had a young lady who plays hockey, African-American young lady who plays hockey. We had the doctor from the university down there somewhere in the Washington, D.C. area, but she was in sports management. But and then the moderator was Daryl Jacobs. He's a commentator on ESPN. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 people were on the panel. And I'm telling you, the young men had no idea the power of the 6 people who were sitting in front of them. Then who came in was former NBA player Rory Sparrow. Rory came in. And he and I were sitting together, and I said, Rory, I need you to come talk to my boys. And he says, okay. Rory played in the NBA for like 12 or 13 years. He played for the Knicks as well as the Chicago Bulls. He had the opportunity to play with Michael Jordan. And I shared with him a story. I said, when you come to school, I'll share your story with you, but I'll share it to you real quick. Because years ago, we were at a Knick Spur game, and I've shared with you before, my aunt at one point was married, and he's passed away. Now, he was married to George Gervin, Iceman's cousin. So every time the Spurs would come to town, whether they played the Knicks or the Nets, we'd go to the game and hang out with the Spurs after the game. So on this particular day, and I was telling Mr. Sparrow this yesterday, and he had Rory just had a street named after him, by the way, in Paterson, New Jersey. But in any event, I was sharing with him that we were out one night hanging with George Gervin and Bill Cartwright and Gene Banks and a whole bunch of, a few other players of the Spurs. Go to the restaurant, and these guys come up and ask for an autograph. So I was like, okay, Ice and all, and they're giving autographs. Now they come to me, and I said, listen, I'm not an NBA player. Now, I was in a sweatsuit, mind you. I was in a sweatsuit because we'd gone to the game, so I was comfortable. I was in a sweatsuit, and they're like, we want your autograph. I said, I'm not an NBA player. And they would not let me rest. Yes, you are. You just don't want to sign. I'm like, I am not an NBA player. Yes, you are. They kept pressing me. Now, mind you, I knew Rory because Rory came from Paterson. Rory graduated Eastside High School. We were just at the game. I knew the stats that, that he had just put up in that particular game because I was there. The guys kept pressing me. So finally I said, give me the paper. Took the paper and I signed Rory Sparrow on there. So now the guys are like, see, we knew it. We knew you were like, okay, all right, you know it. So I tell Rory this story yesterday, and we both have a laugh. He said, oh, so you got to be Rory Sparrow for a day. I said, yes. Exactly. So he said, oh, you got to be Rory Sparrow for that. Yep. I said, these guys, I said, they would not let me alone. They would not. And so, and crazy. Now, this is the part I didn't tell him because it was really funny. I have this ring, this pinky ring that has my initials on there. And the initials are M-A-M. And I had that ring on. So one of the guys that was pestering us for the autographs, he sees it. He says, wait a minute. You said you were Rory Sparrow. That ring says M-A-M. His buddy that was with him turned around and said, oh, that's probably his wife's ring. I was like, oh my God, I can't get out. Anyway. Anyway, so when Rory, you know, I gave him the Cliff Notes version yesterday as we sat together. But when he comes to the school to talk to the boys, I'll give him the full story. But, you know, people are crazy. See, that's why I tell you, I don't get starstruck. I don't. I've met famous people from across the globe, and I just don't get starstruck. Like, I appreciate your work. I do. I appreciate what you do. But in my mind, I'm just as great, just as good as you are. Because I tell you all the time, the only difference between a quote-unquote celebrity and anybody else who's not a celebrity is what they do is seen by more people, and they make a heck of a lot more money for doing it. But other than that, they are human just like anybody else. Matter of fact, there would be no star if there were no fans. People really need to think about that. There would be no stars if there were no fans. You remove the fan base, the star is just like anybody else. The only thing that makes a star is the fan base. So if you remove the fan base, they're no longer a star. It's like I had this discussion with my students in terms of leaders and followers. A leader there's a quote that says, a leader who does not have followers is just taking a walk. And my students and I, we exploded that. We unpacked that quote. And so what does that mean? A leader who does not have followers is just taking a walk. And we unpacked it. And the boys understood exactly what the quote meant. It's the same thing. There would be no star. A star is not a star without a fan base. That's just bottom line. So for those celebrities who get all full of themselves and they can't take pictures and sign autographs and be appreciative of their fans, something's wrong with them. For those, especially with kids. Now, maybe, you know, with the grown-ups, like, okay, because, you know, I can imagine it can be inundating. It can be overwhelming in terms of people always up in your face wanting you to sign something or take pictures. I understand it. But when you just take on this stay away from me attitude or this cocky attitude or this arrogant attitude because you claim and you think you're this star, without the fan base, there would be no star. All right. All right, so I'm just saying all that because, you know, yesterday I was actually sitting with celebrities. I was chatting once again with folks who had been either in the sports arena or in the acting world or whatever. When the moderator, Daryl Jacobs, started the session, the panel discussion, what he shared with the students, because my school wasn't the only ones there, what he shared with the students was, you all are having an opportunity to learn about things that when I was your age, our teachers didn't teach us. And he was absolutely right, because I say that to my students all the time. They're getting an opportunity to learn about how life works, good and bad. Because racism is not good. That's just the bottom line. But racism does and did and probably forever will exist. It's ignorant, but it is what it is. In terms of understanding how racism works, and how you need to be able to prepare yourself to be able to navigate through it. That's the type of education my students and many students are having an opportunity to get now. Matter of fact, as I was talking with my students yesterday morning before we went to the session about Buck O'Neill and Herb Carnegie, I said, you know, there are folks down in the state of Florida who would not want me to have this conversation right now. If I was in Florida, I might get in trouble for having this conversation with you right now. Because folks are trying to erase and hide and act like history wasn't what it was. History is what it is. So, they're trying to erase it. They're trying to take us backwards. When I say us, I'm talking about the world. I'm not talking about just black people. I'm not talking about just white people. I'm not talking about just Spanish people. there are some folks who are out there trying to take the world backwards. And and as I was talking to Russell Patterson, 85 years old, played in the Negro Leagues, served in the military, all kinds of stuff. And I made that comment about there are folks trying to take us back. And his response was, if we don't get our education and learn and do and so forth, they are going to take us back. We are going to go back. Now, this is an 85-year-old man that's saying, yes, if we are not careful, if we don't prepare ourselves and do what we need to do in terms of education and everything else, it's going to go back. That's a sad statement. And this is coming from somebody who lived through it. Because one of the questions came up about him and, being in the Negro Leagues and how he felt about that. And he was straight up about the whole race. He said, the only reason I wasn't in the major league because I was black. And he put his arms up and took his hand and rubbed it against his arms and said, the only reason I was not in the major leagues was because of this. It's because I was black. That's the only reason. And he went on to talk about the racism and the racist acts that were done and the days back when many of the Negro League players were far surpassed the active major league players at that time. The only reason, as Mr. Patterson said, the only reason those folks were not playing Major League Baseball was because of their skin color. Now, Mr. Patterson, I'm telling you, he had a sense of humor because he already told, when we were talking, he already said, man, I had a mouth on me. I know that. So he was straight up. He said, in terms of going into the major league, he said he knew he had been in the Martin Luther King marches and everything. And he said, Martin was always talking about turning the other cheek. He said, I'm telling you right now, I wasn't turning the other cheek. That's another reason why I couldn't go to the majors, because there's no way in the world I'm going to sit there and let folks spit on me and slap me and I'll not hit them back. So that's why he wasn't the one. Like Jackie Robinson was able to do it because they told Jackie right off the bat that you're not going to be able to retaliate or respond. They're going to spike you and spit on you and kick you, and you're going to have to go in back doors at restaurants and not sleep in the same hotel the teams. You're going to have to deal with all that as you break that barrier to come into Major League Baseball. And Herb Carnegie had to do the same thing. You're gonna break. In order for you to break that barrier, you cannot retaliate. You cannot, because once you retaliate, that's the excuse they need for you not be here. So Mr. Patterson was very quickly to say, he said, that's why it couldn't have been me, because there's no way in the world somebody going to slap me on my cheek and I'm going to turn it the other one. And he said that yesterday as he gave his response. So he's like, So Jackie Robinson was a special individual to be able to take all of that in order to break the barrier. So again, if you have the opportunity, I'm laughing based on some text messages I'm seeing here as I'm scrolling through. If you have the opportunity, again, the documentary is called Beyond Their Years: The Incredible Legacies of Herb Carnegie. That's Herb Carnegie, Carnegie, and Buck O'Neil. Buck O'Neil did get to the coaching ranks, kind of, sort of, in Major League Baseball. He was in a part of a program with the Chicago Cubs, but he still never had the opportunity to actually be seen or on camera. And he was a mentor to so many different African-American baseball players. Matter of fact, Dusty Baker, who has won World Series in various teams, he's in the documentary as well, talking about the significance and the impact of Buck O'Neil. So we're coming down because, see, for me, Black history is 365, 24/7. There's no such thing as just 1 month for me. Like, that's nonsense. It's nice that the acknowledgement, okay, we're going to pause, just like we do all the other things that we acknowledge. But the truth of the matter is, Black history is 365 and a quarter days, 24 hours, 7 days a week. The documentary is Beyond Their Years: The Incredible Legacies of Herb Carnegie and Buck O'Neil, two icons that blazed a trail in sport and changed the world. And that they did. All right, my guest will be calling in shortly, and we'll continue the discussion. A lot of things going on. I mean, in terms of, it is an interesting time. I'm not saying that we haven't had interesting times before. If you go back biblically, they had some interesting times but right now, in terms of the hatred and the evil, that things that we take for granted that we would normally do, more and more is being impacted by evil and hate. And where I'm going with this is the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl last week. And as we all know, World Series, Super Bowl, World Cup, whatever, we have a celebratory parade. Well, for many of you, I don't know if you've kept up with current events or not, but the Kansas City Chiefs had their parade and there was a shooter in the midst. A bunch of kids got hit with bullets. Thank God they didn't die, but there was a young lady. She was, matter of fact, a DJ just like me. She was a DJ in the Kansas City area, 44 years old. She got killed. Mother, daughter, sister, so forth and so on, woke up that morning to go to a celebratory parade. They wanted to celebrate the victory of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Super Bowl. She loses her life just going to a parade. So these days, whether you're going to church, whether you're going shopping, because there was a shooting, as you know, in Joel Osteen's church. In Joel Osteen's church down there in Texas, there was a shooting there. All right. So whether you go to church, whether you're going to the movies, whether you're going to a parade, whether you're going shopping, there is no such thing as safety. That's why, for me, I pray a prayer of protection every morning. I thank God in advance, and then I pray for protection as I go throughout the day, because in school, there's nowhere you can go where the possibility of someone perpetuating, or shall I say, acting out of hatred and doing an evil act that's going to take somebody's life. Nowhere is sacred anymore. Not church, not the shopping mall, not the supermarket, not a parade, not a school, not a dance hall, not a club, not an anything where somebody's not inflicting some hatred that leads to somebody losing his or her life. So yes, I make sure in the mornings before I leave, I pray a prayer of protection. YouTube is wonderful because there are all kinds of prayers on there that you can listen to. If you don't feel like you can pray yourself, or that you can't say words or thoughts that are prayerful yourself, you have the opportunity to listen to some prayers on YouTube. YouTube is filled with Psalm 91 prayers of protection. Filled. And if you go to YouTube and you keyword in the search bar prayers of protection, you will get a plethora of prayers that will pop up that you can listen to. Do not leave home without praying. As kids, when we would travel south, when we were getting on the highway, my mother, father, my sister, before the car pulled off, everybody would bow their heads and we'd say a short prayer. So when I became an adult, I did the same thing with my family. Wife, kids, we were taking a long trip. So one day my youngest daughter, Niara, asked the question, how come we don't do this every time we get in the car, regardless of where we're going? Whether it's a short trip or any, that's a good point. Now, we didn't do it, but I said, that's a good point. But in 2024, every time you get in the car, we need to say that prayer of protection. All right. This morning I did